Is the reproduction like an ice cube in your glass on a hot summer's day? Or is it like an iceberg headed directly for the Titanic? Hello folks, my name is Stephanie Canada. In case we're meeting for the very first time, yes indeed, that's my real name, and no, I don't live there. In today's video, we're going to be discussing about the differences between a true vintage pattern and its modern reproduction. Now this is a subject that I have broached before, and, well, it wasn't great. But that was a general overview, and I'll link that down in the description for you should you want to go watch me roast all of the companies at once. But in today's video, we're going to specifically look at one particular pattern. Well, okay, two. We're going to be looking at the modern Simplicity 1356. Now this pattern is a reproduction of this, oh crap, I didn't look at the date. This 1969 Simplicity pattern, number 8125. There's a dog whining in the background. Hang on a second. Dog. Oh. We have now been dogged. So what we're going to be doing today is we are going to be looking at these two patterns line for line and their instructions. Because, well, I don't really see this going over too well. But maybe that's just because I'm a shady bitch. And as this will be the first in a series of these, as I find the original vintage patterns and line them up to the reproductions that I have, we're going to do this in a certain order. The very first thing we're going to be looking at is the envelope. I realize it's a little ridiculous, but just to have a good, excuse me, madam, can I help you? Just so we have a decent idea of what we're looking at. Then from there, we're going to be going into the instructions. Now, I am certainly not going to do a line-for-line reading of these instructions because, well, modern pattern instructions are ridiculous. But that's just me. And then, of course, after the instructions, we'll dive into the pattern. And then from there, we'll wrap it all up with my final thoughts as to how good or how bad this turned out to be. So grab your coffee, Bing Bong coffee mug optional, and let's go ahead and do this thing. So when looking at the envelopes initially, we don't see too terribly big of a difference. Obviously they changed the numbers, which is by far the most annoying part of this entire situation. And as modern sizing differs from vintage sizing, you obviously are going to have differences. So eloquent. I deserve to be a YouTuber. But beyond that, you definitely see jiffy patterns listed here and here, and the 1960s version was easy cut, easy sew. And the easy version for the modern pattern is no zippers, no buttons, no snaps, it ties. How much can we dumb down this? Come on, people. I mean, yeah, I don't like closures either, but they're a part of life. It's okay. You're learning. Anyway, off soapbox. And while the price for the 1960s version is on the front of 65 cents, you have to turn over this one to find that it is $17.95. Just a little different. Now, just so everyone knows, I did acquire this pattern actually on Etsy itself. Because, well, believe it or not, in all of those patterns in my office, I didn't have this one. So I opted to go ahead and buy it. It was $11.95 plus shipping. Now let's go ahead and we'll just stay on the back here. Now that we've zoomed out far enough to actually show this to you, the top one here is the modern one. It's going to have all of your modern trappings and trimmings. Also known as no diagram. You do have your measurements here. You have the pattern size and then you have the European size. Now this one actually has finished garment measurements and it does include design and wearing ease. And it also has all of it again in French and Spanish. Now what we can see here is this is the original 1969 pattern. It has an actual layout of the pattern pieces themselves, as well as the number in large in large format, and it does say simple to sew Mrs. Jiffy reversible dress. And then on the left-hand side, it shows you all of your body measurements, tells you the fabric requirements. But even though this was the new sizing, you do see a notable difference in the sizes of the two patterns. The modern one is a 14 to 22, so the range is going to be from, I can't read upside down, 36 to 44. The vintage sizing is a 12 to 14, which for this one is going to be a 34 through a 36. So because on both patterns we have a 36-inch bust, that is going to be the one we are looking at today. But now, for some instructions. All right, now for the vintage instructions, pretty simple, straightforward. You have one page, double-sided. On the very front, you are going to have your pattern layout again, your cutting layout on all of your fabrics, as well as how to use your simplicity pattern. On the back side is literally every instruction that you're going to get to make this dress. So, yeah. And this is it. You get 2 sides, a couple instructions as you go along the way, and just from first glance, it doesn't seem to be too terribly difficult to understand. At least because I just tend to jump to the unprinted patterns that have way less information and there's way more detailing. So maybe it's just my personal anecdotal evidence here. And now on to the modern instructions. Now with the modern instructions, they apparently decided to waste a crap load of paper. Okay then. That's cute. So on the very first page, you see what the drawing looks like, how many pattern pieces you have, your general directions, and the most sparse cutting layout I do believe I have ever seen. And a lot of white space around here that I feel like could have probably been used a little bit better. So then we turn over to the back side, where in bold the very first thing that my eyeballs go to is retro dress. Because we didn't already know this? Is there another Simplicity 1356? If I can find a more modern one that goes along with it, I'll go ahead and put it here. If not, why did you feel the need to do that? So now looking at this, they look pretty okay. I mean, all of the instructions are in the left-hand column and all of your writing is on the right-hand column, whereas on the vintage, it's sort of, here's a thing, here's your instructions, here's a thing, here's your instructions. That's like a Gala apples to, Granny Smith. It's fine, either way works. And then once you go on to the 3 of 3, it then has the completion of the instructions on the front side. And I will say very nicely, it does have all of the instructions on the right-hand side in Spanish, which is 2 thumbs up for inclusivity because patterns are not only used by English-speaking countries. Good job, Simplicity. See, I'm gonna try and find positives sometimes when they're there. So not too terribly far off for the instructions other than the ridiculously light cutting layout. And now for the reason you're all here, let's lay out the patterns side by side and see how they did. So we're just gonna go ahead and start off with pattern piece A, which is, according to the 1969 version, the dress front. According to the modern version, it's the front and side back. Apples to oranges, not quite, but we get the idea of what they're saying here. Now, the moment of truth. How does it line up? Oh my god. Cool. Simplicity, I have questions for you. Oh my god. How did you screw up such an easy pattern? Okay, I also ironed both of these to give them the best chance of lining up. Anyway, just remember, all modern patterns come with seam allowances, and so did vintage ones. So even if you count the seam allowance, the bottom, she doesn't line up even close. Like the bottom of this, which the larger of the two sizes should align with the smallest line of the modern pattern. My bottom of my actual one is sitting at a 16, actually a little bit past it, almost, yeah, just past the 16. Yeah. So the vintage one flares out more at the bottom, step 1. Now, as we migrate up, nope. Nopity nope, nope. Those darts are much larger on the modern one. The darts are just wrong. The darts are just plain wrong. There is no way these even remotely line up. I'm sure they line up with your arm, but they're huge compared to the vintage one. I mean, you're looking at easily 3/4 of an inch difference in the darting along your bust to get this to line up the way it's supposed to be. Overall, the arm's eye isn't even completely closest to where it should be. The modern one takes a much larger curve into the arm's eye, whereas the vintage one is a much more straight line and then up. And even a little bit of the neckline is different on this pattern. Wow, I actually was not expecting this one to be quite as bad as it was. Well, that's the front. Let's move on, because there are more pieces to this bad boy. Right, the tie end can't be that bad. Okay, here we go. The tie end. It is 1/4 of an inch shy of the seam line. So this tie on the vintage version is, again, 3/4 of an inch larger than the modern version. Why they felt the need to downsize that, of all things. And then look here. You get all the way to the end. I am like almost to the 22 length. The 14 is way the heck back here. So they're even giving you smaller ties for no apparent reason. Now I will note here that you can see clearly there is a difference in the seam allowance, that the seam allowance for the modern pattern is 3/8 of an inch, whereas the vintage leaves 5/8 of an inch. So that will account for math. Editing Stephanie here. If you take the 5/8 inch seam allowance of the vintage pattern and you subtract the 3/8 inch of the modern pattern, you get 2/8 of an inch, which equals 1/4 inch on each side of the pattern, which means that the vintage pattern has 1/4 inch or 0.635 centimeters more seam allowance on each side. But still, the length doesn't change. Why would you make it shorter for no apparent reason? Now, I have not made this pattern. I don't intend to make this pattern because I think this would look like a potato sack on me. And while I really don't wanna, I guess we have to do the back piece too. So let's see. What? So we're currently lined up, dress C back to number 2, side and back. I have lined up along the fold line. So yeah, apparently my pattern got cut along the seam allowance at some point because, well, there is no side seam allowance, it's gone. But that is the previous owner's fault. However, again, that would only be 5/8 of an inch, and we've already proven that there aren't 2 sizes on this thing. So even taking that into account, what we're seeing here is just rampant liberties that have been taken. Why on God's green creation they opted to raise the back a full, 5 inches to make a more modern back seam instead of like the super fun low cut back? Beyond me. They have once again changed the shape of the arm's eye. So you can see where there's a shoulder seam line, but then there's an extra 2 inches over the front. So that way the back actually is supposed to wrap up and around, I think, just a little. Why would you opt to shorten the shoulder sleeve, raise the center back to a normal neckline, and completely rearrange the arm's eye of this dress so that it completely messes with the fit? And I'm really quite confused as to why they decided to add so much to the back of this dress. The back of the modern pattern is substantially larger. I'm sorry, if this isn't drafting off of a modern block to make a retro look, I don't know what else is. This is a jiffy pattern. There are 3 pattern pieces. It's just not necessary to have made all these changes. I just can't believe it. It's so bad. So what are my takeaways? Well, I have some issues. The fact that a simplicity jiffy pattern that has exactly 3 pattern pieces was so vastly different is part of the reason why modern sewists have such trust issues when it comes to these retro patterns. This should not have been hard. There are 3 pieces to reproduce. How we ended up with such a variance by the arm's eye and by the neckline is astonishing to me. Am I saying that the previous version of this pattern was perfecto the first time? No, of course I'm not. But I am saying that especially along the back piece and just in general how they dealt with the straps, there were so many liberties taken that I don't really know how it would work. I don't know how you would create the same dress. So yes, there are different undergarments to be thought about, absolutely. Yes, there are different people, different sizes, everything fits everyone differently, and you always have to adjust it, absolutely. However, what you are starting with is, to me, not as good as the original vintage pattern. Well, folks, I hope this gave you a little bit of actual hard physical evidence as opposed to anecdotal evidence that comes along with which one is better, a retro or a vintage pattern. As I said at the beginning, this is one of many as I find reproduction patterns, and I want to go against an original vintage, which we started out on a great start of that. If you enjoyed this video and my analytical dive into this pattern, please do go ahead and hit that like button. It does help me out in the algorithm. You can also comment down below. Let me know which patterns that you guys would like me to try next. I do have a stash of reproduction patterns that I am looking to find the original vintage ones for. Some of them are going to be much harder to find than others. But absolutely, if you have suggestions as to which one you'd like to see me do next, go ahead and drop it on down below so that I can know which ones to be on the hunt for. Bonus points if you know the original number and the modern number because, well, they aren't the same as we've seen. If you want to see more content like this or just generally me being saucy, go ahead and click subscribe. You can turn on the bell as well if you want little gifts in your notification bin as to when I have uploaded a new video. Thank y'all for watching, and we'll see y'all next time. Okay, I need to do the intro. All right, how frizzy is the hair?
Yes.
Really bad, or because I try to like...
It looks like you're curled like 1920s flapper girl style.
Okay, I'll take that. Excuse me. Is it more like an iceberg or a cube of ice? Oh wait, I can't do this with a dog in my lap. Is the modern version more like an ice cube in your glass on a cool, crisp summer day? Or... No, that doesn't help. That's awkward. Do you want to look at the camera and be pretty? You are very distracting right now. You would think I would remember to grab my coffee, but I never do. There goes my lipstick. And 'cause I can't read upside down. Why? What in the actual fork were they doing?